But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. Now let's take a look at some of the stories making headway on our dailies this morning. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story there states cocaine scandal heads to roll as NDLEA remand Kyari others. And the riders white top brass worked to suppress case. Anti-drug law officers also involved. This is according to the police. Embattled DCP can be tried immediately. This is according to lawyers. And then there's a breakdown there of video evidence of DCP Kyari's alleged involvement in a drug trafficking. Quite explicit. You see other stories right at the top. Impeachment. Zamfara CJ inaugurates panel to probe deputy governor. And on page 20 on the Daily Trust newspaper, EU announces 390 billion naira digital economy package for Nigeria. 2021, cholera killed over 3,000 in 33 states, Abuja, and this is according to the federal government. And just below the pictorial showing Kyari's alleged involvement in drug trafficking, you see on page 24, students blast ASU. Federal government over strike, threaten protest. You also see the story about Ocean Police, Civil Defense disagree over attack on Arigbeshola. Adulterated petrol, queues persist in Abuja, Lagos, others. You'd also see the story about 2023 presidency. Allies defend MFLA. And in other papers this morning, on the Punch, you'd see drug business. Police tackle NDLEA. Agency detains Abba Kyari. 4 others. You see the riders there that say Kyari runs drug cartel that passes through Brazil, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. That's according to the NDLEA. Arrest your officers on payroll of drug barons. Police reply anti-drug agency. DCP went on alleged illegal operation while on suspension, says the NDLEA and others. And you see other stories. Federal government gross debt to grow by 92%, hits 136 trillion naira in 2026, says the IMF. ASU begins 4-week rollover strike. Governments oppose action in state universities. You'd see on page 11 on the Punch, PDP governors accuse federal government of insincerity, duplicity in dirty field saga. After 42-day vacancy, Makinde names Lekan Balogun 42nd Olubadan. And just below a pictorial there that shows army officers during their practical promotion examination at the 22nd Armored Brigade, Sobi Cantonment in Ilorin on Monday. UN carpets federal government as Nigeria records over 3,000 cholera deaths in 425 local government areas. Lagos robbers shoot businesswoman. Hospital demands police report. Victim dies. And on page 8, Fayemi dodges questions on 2023 presidential bid, says prayers ongoing. Very interesting story there. You find other stories on The Nation this morning. A lot of papers are leading with a story about Abba Kyari for extradition to U.S. after NDLEA probe. ASU grounds varsities for 4 weeks. Excitement over new Olubadan. These are some of the major stories on The Nation. And The Guardian this morning, Super Cup, Super Scandal. NDLEA releases shocking details of Kyari's drug deals. And you find other stories on The Guardian. Soludo denies requesting applications for political appointments. Aregbe Shola rattled in Osogbo as suspected hoodlums attack convoy. ASU ruffles jam Pantami as it fires 4-week warning shot. And then there's a pictorial there of Abba Kyari, Usman Al-Ghali Baba and Muhammad Buba Marwa. Why Buhari failed to contain terrorists by Wazir Katsina. And on page 2 on The Guardian, regulator mum over fuel scarcity as NNPC relocates team to Lagos. Now let's take a look at these stories on our dailies this morning. And as I earlier told you, we have Deputy Business Editor Sunday Michael with us in the studio this morning.
Good morning, Aisha. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, first, before we go into the major, story making the rounds this morning, how did you get here? Was it easy for you?
It wasn't easy at all. I think I basically had to stay back in the office yesterday. I get a hotel close because I know what I had in my tank could possibly not take me to my house and bring me back. I mean, you can see that with Ilya struggling to get in here today. I'm sure after this program we have to also go and take our cues. If not, we may probably not be able to go home today. So it's a pathetic development. We spoke about this over a week ago, and we're still where we are. One of the writers today, as I was going through the papers, described it aptly when he said, "A nation of adulterated fuel and adulterated stories." I think
yes, I think that's that's the narrative. Adulterated fuel and adulterated stories. Now, this story that's everywhere. We seem distracted, by seeing this. The story of Abba Kyari's, drug saga. Many would say he didn't see that coming.
It wasn't just him. People who had expressed sympathies about the person of Abba Kyari were really taken aback. I know in several platforms, including those of my alma mater, it was a heated debate. Some wanting to even believe against the evidences that were displayed that he's been set up. Because at a point in this country, Abba Kyari became what many Nigerians hoped for. Other than the whole status of a celebrity policeman, he busted high-profile crimes. And this is a country that is in dire need of role models in every sphere of our national life. So he came through as one. I mean, to the extent that even the House of Representatives at the time gave him a standing ovation for what appeared like a seeming public admission of the fact that he has been doing something that had come to the notice of everybody. And then the hush puppy saga came in, wearing very clear there were no evidences, and it felt like some persons, desperately trying to bring him down. And then this one came out yesterday, and everything happened so fast. Before some people even woke up to the story, he was already on the net of the NDLEA, from declaring him wanted to getting the police to act, to arresting him, to taking him. It was way too fast. It has left a lot of people disappointed. On the one hand. On the other hand, I think it is also kudos to our institutions that they have structures in place that can fish out, this kind of sleaze within its system, so that it doesn't, appear like every crime you see in the country happens only by other people. Most of this high-profile crime you see gets the collaboration of people from the agencies of government. And what this whole mess has revealed is that there is so much going on that needs to be cleaned, really.
Right, that just like the police is saying here that some anti-drug law officers are also involved.
When the police responded yesterday, it then began to look like trading blames, essentially. But if you read the initial statements of the NDLEA, you would recognize that they had attempted to invite Abba Kyari since for over 5 days, since February 10th. And there was no how they would have extended that invitation to him without putting its mother organization, the Nigerian police, on notice. So even if Abba Kyari had failed to turn up as a person, the police would have been able to coerce him to show up at the NDLEA office. You know, he didn't do that. The police also failed until they had to use the name and shame approach. You know, publicly issued a statement declaring him wanted. And since he was a celebrity, he was a poster boy for the Nigerian police, that indicted them so much. They were forced to swiftly act and handed over both Abba Kyari and his own men, you know, high-profile police officers for that matter, to the NDLEA, and then you are coming out to say the NDLEA officers are involved. If it's a covert operation, naturally, the people involved would have acted with you as though they were cooperating on to the point where they are comfortable enough, you know, to bring out this operation. So maybe when we go to trial, when he's eventually charged to the court, we will begin to understand the extent of involvement of both the police and the NDLEA. There is no doubt, there is no exonerating anybody. Like we rightly mentioned, it is impossible for this kind of high-profile crimes to be committed without support from people from within. You know, the question really is fishing out these bad eggs, you know, and purging them out of the security agencies in this country.
You know, I like these headlines, The Guardian, your super cop, super scandal. You know, this doesn't look like a good image. What image, you know, does this create for the Nigerian, not just the Nigerian police, but for people who are there to actually stand
for the
people?
It's a major scandal. It has the capacity to further whittle down what is already a suspect in the relationship between the citizenry and the Nigerian police. You know, even though all of us grew up to become accustomed to the slogan that the police is your friend, the public conduct of police officers have never suggested this. You know, citizens have come under brutal malhandling and all of that. I mean, the recent issue of the NSAS protests, we all are testimonies to how much distrust that exists between the citizenry and the police. And to then have this type, like, you know, I said in my opening statement, he was a celebrated cop person. And I could speak from my own personal experiences. We have had times where we needed intervention of some police hierarchy, and we got recommendation to speak to Kyari. And he intervened forthwith, and we got those issues resolved. You know, for once, people started thinking, you know, you will forgive Nigerians at some point, even calling for Abba Kyari to be made the Inspector General of Police. At a time, he was that much loved, he was that much followed, he was a celebrity corps member, more or less. You know, he handled high-profile cases, he resolved them. Everywhere there was crisis, everybody had hoped, state governors hoped that the police would deploy the Abba Kyari team to come in and, you know, fix those kind of crises. So it was that kind of following that he had, that kind of enthusiasm that followed whatever he did. And then all of a sudden, everything, you know, started unpacking with the revelation by Hush Puppy. I mean, somebody jokingly put it in the social media. He said, a policeman by morning, a tailor by afternoon, and a drug at the pharmacist by you know, I mean, a mild way of putting it. You are wanting in the morning, which you acknowledge by noon. You are recommending fashion designers to scammers, and then by evening, you are involved in the sales of drugs. I mean, and look at the size of these things. Promising to offer as much as $64,000 cash for these cocaines to be taken out of the coffer, what has already been seized, to be taken out of the coffers of government and replaced with dummy items and then sold to the street. Nothing can be worse. You cannot retrieve guns from criminals by day and then sell drugs. That has become a major cause of worry for us in this country. We are seeing teens and young people going into drugs and, you know, aided by that intoxication, doing all kinds of things, you know, carrying out all kinds of atrocities within our society. That has become a major source of worry for this country. I mean, so it's unfathomable that by day you are seen like somebody who is trying to prevent crime, then by evening your actions directly, you know, inflate the very crime that you seem to fight, because there is really no how you can separate crime and drugs. They seem to go hand in hand. You know, I mean, it's difficult.
Well, we're going to be following that, and we get to see how that pans out in court. Now, another story of interest is the one about ASU declaring to go on strike just yesterday. Could you react to that?
What triggered my memory was when I saw the notice of the they said 4 weeks rollover. Use those languages in the bank when you give, when you issue an overdraft. You say rolling, this overdraft is rollover. So if you pay back, we roll it over for months. So what they are saying in essence is, let us not use the word indefinite. That sounds rather very big and very discouraging. So we say 4 weeks rollover. It looks like a 4-week thing. If after 4 weeks you don't meet our demand, we roll over for another 4 weeks. And who knows? So this can go on for another 1 year. No, I was also looking at another statistics of interest, and that was saying this is the 15th or so strike in about 21 years. That's huge. It means every other year there had been a strike in the last 21 years. It's amazing how much time we have robbed from the young people of this country, being unable to basically resolve a crisis that has been there forever, and designing templates, to forestall this kind of occurrence and find a way to move forward. It's appalling. You now begin to understand why parents of means have completely lost faith in public institutions. The fundings are not adequate, the standards are dropping, and then you have teachers who are in the classroom on Monday, and by Friday they are gone on strike, then they return on Monday, and by Tuesday. And the effect of this constant strike is that you have all kind of distortions on the academic calendar. Now, we are talking about 15 times in 22 years. We are not talking about strikes that were occasioned by, let's say, issues like the COVID-19 pandemic, where everywhere had to shut down. So this incident closing and opening has ensured that, for instance, even the lecturers have not been able to continue to get, constant development, that is needed to also impact knowledge on the student. And then the student is here today, tomorrow is there, the day after is here. I mean, who pays the price for all of these distortions in the life of people who are supposed to be leaders of tomorrow? So it is taken for a norm now in this country that if you are sending your words to a public school for a 4 or 5 year program, it may just end up spending 6 or 7 years, for no fault of his, for not failing any course, but just basically this kind of distortions from failures, both from ASU and the federal government. So it's another painful episode. I hope that, in fairness, that we don't continue to drag this thing until this administration ends up, as we have seen with the fuel subsidy thing, ends up, passing it to the incoming administration, and then we continue to have those kind of distortions in our calendar.
We're also seeing that students are threatening to protest, against this.
There are stakeholders in this country, to be fair, and the only language they probably have, now to communicate their displeasure is to probably hit the street and make the government understand they don't like what is happening. The student bodies in their own comments blamed both parties. Government for failure to keep to its own parts of the agreement, to the lecturers for not exploiting any other instrument rather than, it's beginning to look like they enjoy the whole act of going for strike, and they look forward to any opportunity to jump on those trails. So that's what the students are saying. Can you blame them? Some of them have been there forever. They have a life to live. They need to get done with these things and then move on to other phases of their life, rather than have issues like this perpetually keep them in the walls of the schools.
Well, we're going to take a look at some more stories quickly after this timeout. Do stay.
This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. Finally, my co-pilot is around. Are you back?
Well, I thought I would just sneak in, silently, but Zainab just threw the bomb. Well, it's really, really sad what is going on in this country. The hurdles, the difficulties that people have to go through to get fuel into their cars. It's almost like everywhere is shut down, literally, because if you are passing and you count the number of cars that have broken down for one reason or the other, either maybe for fuel, a lack of fuel, or maybe the car is now developing faults because of the kind of fuel that we are having, these days. So it's really terrible. It's terrible. After spending hours in the filling station, sometimes you don't even get the fuel. Or maybe even if you do, maybe very little quantity that may not even serve you. And black marketers are,
cashing in, 10 liters, I think somebody told me was 7,000 naira, 10 liters of fuel.
Yes. I mean, I won't be surprised if it sells at even 10,000 naira at this point.
No, it shouldn't be that bad.
Honestly, because it's really bad. The desperation out there is crazy.
Well, we do hope, the situation turns out better. We still have Sunday Michael here with us, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust. And earlier, before we went on that short break, we were talking about ASU. And yesterday, still, ASU was rubbling Pantami, saying he was not qualified to be a professor and all of that. Could you comment on that?
It appears the Pantami scandal will not also go away. I think it was one meeting that addressed a number of issues before it. We are aware of how the process leading to his professorship came under serious questioning. The question was that in his last job, he was merely a senior lecturer. You are supposed to progress from that to several other levels, including a reader, before you are then made an associate, especially given that he's not been in the academic cycle or going back to the same place to provide any kind of scholarship and all of that. So they claim they have investigated these issues, and I think ASU have also threatened to sanction the VC of the university that offered this professorship, and have asked its member across all universities to stop addressing the minister as a professor. But what is left to be seen is whether the Ministry of Communications would also follow the directive to stop addressing the minister as a professor. But they have continued to insist that he went through due processes and he was rightly appointed. But it would be really nice for once in this country if we could address this thing, not necessarily because of Pantami, but because of future occurrence. Let us not get to the point where things that used to be the hallmark of integrity and honor for people who deserve it become something that becomes available for just anybody because somehow they find themselves in public office and they can use their positions to demand for someone. You remember at some point it was chieftaincy tenure. The moment you get chieftaincy tenure everywhere for every government appointee until I think a certain government became uncomfortable with it, and that narrative died down. Then at other point, it became an honorary doctorate degree for just about anybody in power. Universities were dishing them out as a way of getting extra fundings from public office holder. After a while, I think that also went down a bit, and now we are seeing the professorship scandal rocking public universities. I hope, in fairness to everyone, that this issue is properly addressed and put to bed once and for all.
But does ASU, as an association, have the right to withdraw professorship?
No, it's not within their purview. It's within the institution's purview. But ASU draw its membership from lecturers within these institutions. And they are a pressure group. They are trying to say, we are lecturers in this system. We know what we go through by laying down procedures and standards to attain a professorship position. It shouldn't be something you then begin to dish out to people serving in government simply because they've been appointed ministers. That you should keep to those templates so that we don't abuse it, so that somebody else doesn't come and look at people because they are friends of his and just simply it will abuse the process. It will begin to see our system riddle with half-baked professors everywhere. And I think they have a point in driving home that argument. Whether or not Futo would do anything to reverse that position, or even Pantami, in other climes where there is a measure of integrity, even the person who is conferred with this position will say, since this has become so much an instrument of what would I call it, confusion or even argument, I would rather drop the title until I meet up with certain things, or a public institution puts my qualifications through proper scrutiny and then decides to re-award. But we will not say it here. We enjoy this kind of things, and we will continue to move on with it. So I don't think what they have done is out of place entirely.
Well, I mean, the question that everyone will keep asking is just for how long, really?
Yeah.
If you look at the frequency with which this has continued to, surface, just for how long are we going to have to deal with this? Because students are getting tired of this. Government is getting tired of this. I'm sure even the ASU themselves are getting tired of this. But is there just any other way to express their, grievances other than embarking on strikes?
That would be difficult to respond. We have a government over the years that have exhibited absolute lack of integrity. There's nothing that's as bad as showing up on the negotiation table and agreeing to a deal and then coming back to say we cannot implement it. So the question really is, what kind of people did you send to the negotiation table? What would be a proper negotiation table is one that has the Minister of Finance, who has an overview of how much comes into our coffers and goes out realistically as a country, and who can tell you, you see this thing, we can't meet it, because these are the reality. At this point, there is really nothing to hide. It's our country. I mean, if you put the figures on the table and you begin to ask the ASU guys, if we give you ABC, we may not be able to fund EFD. Do we meet all your demand 100% and leave the hospitals unattended to with drugs? Do we meet your demand and we are unable to fund basic primary education? Do we, you need to come straight. These guys are professors, they are PhD holders, they teach the theories in classroom, they are not duns.
And again, this goes back to the issues of funding for tertiary institutions. A lot of arguments have been made, about how can our tertiary institutions be able to be self-sufficient in terms of, funding for themselves. And also, I'm curious about what the private, organizations can do in respect to this. I mean, just a few days ago, we saw how about 100 billion naira was raised by alliance of private sectors, and so, to basically to focus on the issue of insecurity in the country. Yeah. So, is there any chance that we could be able to, do something around that as well when it comes to the tertiary education?
If we have to refer to what the private sector did in terms of raising funds, that's just ad hoc. It's not something that is sustainable. But what is even more sustainable is the arrangement we have in place already, the Education Tax Fund, which is the major source of funding for agencies like TED Fund and UBEC. The Education Tax Fund tax a particular percentage of every company in Nigeria that declares profit in this country. And that runs into several billions of naira. Those are the interventions you see in all of the public and private schools. Public schools in Nigeria, whether owned by the federal or state government. As a matter of fact, both the federal and the state government have completely hands off the provision of infrastructures in university. They've left it to TED Fund. Whatever TED Fund cannot provide, waits there for another TED Fund intervention. That's all that is happening. It's very rare for you to find both state and federal governments doing anything sensitive, other than most times when they create a new university, they say, okay, we are giving you 10 billion naira as take-off grant.
But in that sense, TED Fund, I would say the private organizations through TED Fund have made their own contributions.
Yeah.
But still that looks like it's not enough. So maybe we should now look at other ways to get more companies now remitting to TETFund, maybe something.
Well,
like that.
that would be flogging a dead horse. These same companies have to pay some kind of security levies. They get the TETFund deductions. They get several kind of, and it doesn't remove from their 30% or more corporate tax on the company. So, in fairness, it's like, you know, flogging a willing horse. They are doing so much already. The government has to wake up to its responsibility. Maybe, as you are rightly meant, open up, you know, come up with incentives that would bait new companies, that would make already the existing ones, you know, expand capacity so that what they give you becomes more, because it's statutorily defined a certain percentage of their books. And so if the companies do so well, you get so much more. If they are not doing well, you get whatever is a percentage of what they are doing. So it would be expanding that bit by overall making the economy work so that you get more entrants into that basket of people that can pay. Otherwise, the only other alternative is ask students to pay more. Already we are seeing fees in some public universities competing with fees in private university, and that in itself, you know, it can become a factor for people not to aspire to tertiary education. So it's a fine and delicate balance. For other schools, they are becoming innovative around it by tapping into their alumni you know, reservoirs, especially for schools that have been there for decades, where they've had people rise to positions of governors, of ministers, you know, and all kinds of things. They are now tapping into those sources to say, hey, you became what you are because you got some quality education from this place. Can you give back? I know at the time, ABU had over 10 governors in Nigeria, and they were able to put resources together, and they renovated quite a number of the hostels that we are seeing, and did a whole lot in those institutions. But again, that is drawing from the public funds of some states to do something for their alma mater. So it's a complex web that has to be retaught, and it is the failure of, you know, coming up with something concrete and permanent that keeps seeing this argument. At the forefront of this particular one is not even just about university infrastructure, it's about the remuneration of professors. They are saying in 13 years, they've not gotten a rise. In that 13 years, the dollar has gone from only God knows where it was to whatever it is now. And so their purchasing power has really dipped.
Which means that the initial, you know, amount that was, you know, agreed upon itself may not even be enough, even if federal government was to
if you reach an agreement
everything.
and for 13 years you cannot implement it, the agreement becomes stale. As in, you are at that point where you even if you had implemented, you are at the point where you need to renegotiate those agreements. And part of the problem they have with the government is, from the original agreement of the year 2000, I recall, in my heydays in the university, the agreements are structured such that they will tell themselves that what we have negotiated is not finite. We will make do with this, and we are supposed to return to the negotiation table in another 4 years to review whatever we have in line with current realities. And then you are gone 13 years or so not implemented. Even if you do, it still falls short of what the reality is, you know, because the metrics have changed quite a lot.
The exchange rate, for instance, if you take a look at it, is on another level compared to
completely
like 10 years ago.
Completely on another level, you know. So all of these realities, you know, are forcing these guys to say, I mean, we live in a country where a counselor earns better than a professor. How do you explain that?
Again, I'll still, you know, go back to the issue of how can we make the universities self-sufficient? Are there avenues that we are not taking advantage of, you know, in our tertiary institutions that universities can actually generate funds from? Absolutely.
I first mentioned the alumni part. Now, you must be willing to give credible value to students to want to look back and say, because I'm successful and this was a major part of my success story, we could, you know, pull ourselves together and give back to university by intervening in areas where we can supplement what public fundings are doing. That is one. There is an apparent disconnect between the universities and the private sector, or even the public sector, in terms of research outputs and innovations in these industries. The way we see them abroad, most of the things you see that the companies drive are largely innovations coming from the university system. You know, the students come up with an idea, they register it as patent, you know, to themselves, and develop the idea to a prototype, you know, that is tested by all the government agencies, and they approach these people and say, oh, we have something that can make these your operations better. You know, these guys jointly look at it, and if it's something that is going to add value, they buy off that patent from both the student, because the patent is co-owned by the school and the student. This could be bought off at very huge sums, you know, or some kind of arrangement that then allows the injection of funds to support even more research and development, whilst raising some extra money to do several other things in the university. And the company is taking up that innovation to improve capacity, improve their output, pay more taxes, that helps this university to get even more funding.
But can't we do that here?
It's a big problem. You show up in the universities and it's not like they're not doing enough. There is so much lying there, but these institutions would rather go and import technologies from abroad, from China and the rest that are ready made.
I mean, if you take a look at the tons of projects that students do every year, you know,
amazing.
Sometimes I really wonder, isn't there any idea there that could translate into something?
There are absolutely,
especially from the sciences and
there is no way that these ideas do not exist. What is a failure is a reach out, whether by the institutions, by the universities to the corporate world, or a reach out by the corporate world to the institutions. They are definitely not talking. There is no organization in the middle that is making that conversation happen. We have become so lazy, even in the corporate world, that we don't want to develop anything. We see that institution as something different. There is no interaction. We would rather look up and see what China has put up in the shelf that has gone through all these processes that we are talking about, that we can just pay money for and take straight. If you show up in all of our universities, especially the ones that are science inclined, you will see all kinds of machineries, either for processing cassava or for processing all kinds of raw materials that we have, or even for you know, all kinds of value additions on the things that concerns us, but nobody is taking them up. We would rather, for instance, I showed up at an enterprise innovation activity for university, and I saw a student design a machine that can make pounded yams. But the ones we see on the Amazons and the rest are pounded yam machines made from China. You know, for people who don't even understand what these things are. You know, so it beats your imagination. And there are several areas, several kind of innovations that we have seen, but basically these institutions are not talking. And until we begin to do these things, money would not flow from the institutions who have this money into the university using any. I mean, most of the big universities we have in the world today started as workshops. Exactly. You know, providing solutions, and the world was buying those solutions from them, and they kept expanding and kept formalizing. I showed up in another university and I saw alternative blocks that could deliver cheap and affordable housing. Nobody is talking to them. And because those innovations have been patented, you can't go and copy it. But they would rather remain with what they have that has not changed the narrative for Nigeria, rather than show up and multiply this kind of innovation.
Now let's look at it from this angle. Could there be an argument in the fact that maybe the institutions, the tertiary institutions that we have, do not have what is needed to, you know, teach children in such a manner that they can actually, you know, innovate some of these things that we are talking about? Or is it just merely the Nigerian behavior of always wanting the foreign, you know, thing, you know, rather than, you know, locally sourced? And then also, is it the problem of corruption, in the sense that maybe people do not think that they stand to gain as much when they patronize, you know, locally sourced, you know, things, rather than, you know, when it is from abroad and all that?
In fairness, it's a bit of everything. There is, from the standpoint of communication, I can tell you for a fact that there is not sufficient information about what the universities can do and how much the private sector know about what is available that they can scale. The funding for scaling is with the private sector. The ideas for scaling are with the universities and the polytechnic. So there is not much information from both. The universities have not designed offices or appointed officers whose business it is, as well as private businesses that go out to do marketing essentially. And innovation is on ground. You have done all your work. It is ready for scaling. Nobody will come and scale them until informations are going out to prospects to say, we have this kind of thing that we would like you to look at it repeatedly. And that is why you have the Government Agency for Science, NOTAB, that is supposed to promote this innovation. But how much of this promotion, it will some kind of fair once in a year, and only God knows how far they reach out to people to even participate in those fairs. People should have no other briefings every day than waking up and showing up in some important big organization with huge funding available and demanding to speak with people at the top, where you put out these presentations every day and tell them the opportunities that are available if this kind of scales, or even talking to banks and saying, we could do this if you can provide the fundings for us to modify this equipment and put them out there. People should be doing that. That should be their business and nothing else. From the private sector, they should also deliberately, like you rightly mentioned, be reaching out to see whether they can find opportunity for scale. Some companies have reached their wit end. There is nothing else they can do other than what they are doing. They cannot expand their balance sheets any further because the only thing they know how to do is what they are currently doing. They are looking for opportunities to scale. And they want opportunities that are scalable. They want to see who is that person that can come up with something different that can offer as an alternative maybe to the Kekema Peps of this world. Which medical department has come up with some kind of prototype in drug design that we can immediately put funding into and refine and put and get approvals and put on the shelves of Nigeria. Most of the things we call maganin gargaja today, that seem to kind of give some kind of result, but has its own side effects because of the problem of measurement and quantity and all of that. If fundings come into those things, we can drive them from where they are, the crude point, to a point where they had gone through all kinds of chemical trials, and that makes them safe for human consumption, addressing issues that would have rather spent billions of naira importing drugs from either Pakistan, India, or China. So there really needs to be a synergy. There are agencies that already exist because these ideas have been there forever. They are not new. Maybe the agency is not getting funding, or maybe they have the funding, but they have no idea how this should run. Something should drive this process to allow for a synergy between all. And that is the only way we can move forward, really. I mean, the last time I was saying this, and I like to give this innovation, we talk about the Aba shoes, and I've said it here. We say made in Aba. But have we interrogated the components of that shoe? That the rubber comes from the west because the rubbers are not planted in Aba. That the leather comes from Kanu, the hides, because they are not done in Aba. And that the chemicals come from the Niger Delta, from the petrochemical companies, because they are not done in Aba. So the real thing the Aba man actually does to producing what we call Aba shoes or sandal is the craft, the intellect to weave all of these different components together and then puts them on the shelf as a finished shoe that you come to admire. So if you purchased one pair of the made in Aba shoe, you had kept the hide and skins man in Kanu at work, thereby providing for his family and what. You have also kept the rubber plantation man in the west busy with his farm because somebody is going to take the rubbers from him. You have kept the petrochemicals going because you have had to buy your dye and chemicals to process those skin into things that will not be perishable and become that fashionable shoe that you wear out to your occasion, whether to the Owambes or wherever that everybody comes to admire. So at the end of the day, which part of this country has not been impacted? So I think it's sheer ignorance that we do not understand how these components feed into.
Just like Nigeria doing business with itself.
Basically,
if you look at that
if
model,
we were to produce
that applies, I believe, to
if we were to
sectors.
produce a car today or support the innocent car, every car has anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 components. So it's not just about the metal and rubber. The rubber, the bumper comes from the rubber plantation. The glass comes from that glass company in Kanu. The electronics come from one electronic. The acids, the battery are something else. The brake pads are components that somebody can just sit down and it does nothing other than the brake pads. And that's huge business. Or does nothing other than a glass, or does nothing other than the foams. All the vital foams and the rest would then begin to branch out into car seats and acoustics, and the textile companies will then begin to provide specialized fabrics for these vehicles. So can you see the opportunity for everybody? We are not talking about petrochemicals producing the paint for spraying and then spare parts will continue to roll in and out. So at the end of the day, you buy the Innocent car, or you buy from Proforce in Abeokuta, or you are buying from Peugeot in Kaduna, you are really not just patronizing one part of the country. You are patronizing a product that has input from about 3,000 suppliers. So until we begin to tell these stories like this, and everybody begin to see how one item could draw components from everywhere, we don't really understand that we are doing ourselves a favor by patronizing what we make.
Well, now before we go, quickly let me get your thought on this story about, the governor of the central bank, Godwin Emefiele. We have understand now that there are some support groups, rooting for him to contest for the presidency in 2023, and they are even defending that move. We are seeing that on the front page of Daily Trust newspaper. The details of that is actually on page 6, of the paper. So, when we hear certain names in our politics in Nigeria, it's not what we are used to hearing. Technocrats coming to full-blown politics is sounding always strange. So, why are we reacting in such a manner, in your opinion?
I think you have said it all. We are not used to technocrats throwing themselves in the ring. In this case, maybe not exactly him throwing himself, but Nigerians rooting for this kind of persons. And in fairness, as a person, I think I am happy because we need to get to a point where people would come out whose credentials we can evaluate. I mean, we can basically interrogate. Let us not debase the presidency to the level where only politicians begin to look at it as if it is their birthright, to the extent that they even tell you you are not a politician. And what exactly does it even take to be a politician?
Exactly.
As far as
the word itself, politician in Nigeria, even some
connotes, has a negative connotation. Absolutely.
Some do not even want to be identified or associated
because
with
what it means is you must have the capacity to play people, to say something in the morning and change it that afternoon, or to say something and then deny it by evening if it elicits public outcry. That for them is the idea of a politician. But it's completely different from what we see in the other part of the world. There are people whose words are their bonds, that come out to say, I am going into this because I want to deliver ABC. And if at any point it becomes obvious that I'm unable to deliver what I have promised, I'll step aside. I mean, I'll give you a typical example. In the UK, the last prime minister pushed heavily for the UK to remain in the EU. And people from other parties say, no, we need to pull out of the EU and go our separate ways. And it was a massive argument to the point that they went for a referendum, and those in support of the UK pulling out of the EU emerged victorious. And the Prime Minister said, hey, I vigorously campaigned against this route that we wanted to follow. I do not think I'm the best person to lead this country along this path. Maybe somebody who pushed for this argument and understand what they wanted to achieve will be more fitting. And he stepped aside. We don't have those kind of integrity in our system. The ability to coin people, it's our own definition of politicians.
Yes. So you even hear people say, well, he's a smart politician.
Because he has
meaning that he's not.
Absolutely, that is what it means. What an irony, really. And so that we are thinking of somebody like this. It's even good because it would then, more than any time else, begin to bring all that he has done that is in the public domain into even greater scrutiny. You want to be the president. What have you done? In your capacity in the previous role that you have played that would suggest that you have the skills, the tenacity, and all of that to lead this country. And okay, you were there, you did ABC and XYZ policy. If we didn't see value for it, why do you think you can do anything better? It will subject all of the claims by the Central Bank of Nigeria to have impacted this economy into a more greater scrutiny. And we can begin to interrogate the figures, because if you can't count, then you can't claim. Not this wide claim that some politicians make and say, I have this, I can do this, and then when we look at them beyond the statements, we can't find anything on ground too. And then governors behaving like it has become their birthright to transition from the governor's position to maybe the Senate or probably, you know, we must take it out of the purview of those people and expand it so much so that people who have demonstrated competence in their private practice can genuinely aspire not just for the president of ICOM, because with the communion of Emefiele aspiring here, what it does is it opens up the eye of other people to say, maybe not the president, maybe the governors of our states, maybe the House of Representatives, not this docile House of Representatives that do nothing other than when the governor sends in something he's interested, and in 2 days they pass it and return the documents and get their private jeeps and sponsorship to all parts of the world to go and rest as a fitting reward for becoming stooge of governance.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on Daybreak this morning and sharing your perspectives with us on these stories on our front pages. Always very, very interesting.
And we do hope you don't get to find the long queue as you go to
I pray and hope so too. One thing is sure, I will be in the queue before you come out of the studio. Maybe I will get out of the queue faster than you, but in the interest of everybody, we hope these issues are resolved.
And the chances of coming out of the studio early enough are not really there. So, I don't know, maybe someone will just come to
maybe I will buy
rescue.
more than my budget, and when you come out, we'll find a way to split.
That could work.
That works.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
It's
We'll
my
be speaking
pleasure
with
again.
Sunday Michael, the Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.